felt a lot of pressure that people were trusting me. On the one hand, I'm not taking responsibility for anyone. This is a public beach and this is an opportunity for you to try something. I don't want anyone to try alone, because most people have heard about it from somewhere besides me and not known where to go or how to get in the water. It's like, oh, I've heard that's good for you, or the water calls me also, but no one will go with me. So my main message was, I will go with you, and I will go with you into the water. And that's all I wanted everyone to know. And I've actually been able to do that with people in Germany and many other states virtually, just because I honestly want anyone that wants to have an opportunity.
Hey, I'm Michael Yadrick, and I'm broadcasting from Tacoma, Washington, aka Grit City and the native land of the Puyallup tribe and Stilichum people. This is Tree Hugger Podcast, the show where we reimagine ecological restoration, and the episode where we plunge into Puget Sound. My guest on this show is Renate Rain, 53-year-old mother of 2 adult daughters and grandmother of 6-year-old triplet girls. She is the convener and healer behind the Puget Sound Plungers and a certified deliberate cold exposure guide. Renate describes herself as just a person looking for relief from chronic pain when she slipped into the cool waters of Puget Sound. Alleviating pain came along with an ever-growing community she didn't even know she needed. So on Tree Hugger Podcast, we've talked about Puget Sound quite a bit, but for our listeners across the country, across the world, Puget Sound is a sound of the Pacific Northwest, an inlet of the Pacific Ocean and part of the Salish Sea. The cool measurement is an average temperature of about 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Cool, clean water is the lifeblood of this complex estuarine system of an interconnected marine waterways and basins with myriad connections to the open Pacific Ocean. Who was Puget, and why do we carry this monument to that name? Intending to locate the mythical Northwest Passage, British Royal Navy Captain George Vancouver floated into this area in the late 1790s and claimed it for Great Britain. He named it for one of his officer buddies, Lieutenant Peter Puget. The name would later encompass the whole region over time. The term Puget Sound is used not just for the body of water, but also the metropolitan regions centered around the sound. In 2009, the term Salish Sea was established by the United States Board on Geographic Names as the collective waters of Puget Sound, the Strait of Juan de Fuca, and the Strait of Georgia. Of course, these are the native waters of notable Coast Salish peoples such as the Duwamish, Nisqually, Snoqualmie, and Stilichum. Back to Renate. She describes, while looking into ways to become more metabolically healthy and boost her mitochondrial function, she heard about cold plunging. Renate mentions this entry to cold via quantum biology strategies. There's a link to more info about this in the show notes, but long story short, quantum biology entails at its core free, complementary, and low-barrier maneuvers for our health that revolve around harnessing light and getting closer to the Earth. We kind of dig into the subject way back in the Tree Hugger archive with the episode named Ecology of Light with Travis Longcore, if you want to check it out. Anyway, Renate took her first 1-minute cold plunge in the Sound with someone she met on Instagram in fall of 2021. By wintertime, Renate figured out an effective way to get people from the beach and into the water safely. She kept researching, kept inviting, and people kept coming. This discussion digs into how we get started with plunging. We also talk about how to not go it alone. Renate believes that anyone and everyone who has heard of plunging and or could benefit should have the opportunity to try it, and so it is her mission to provide a place and a person to go with. Accordingly, in the show notes, there are links to the Puget Sound Plungers, Instagram, and Facebook group. Members from the group have started plunges in nearby counties as well, and there are regular Tacoma plunges and Stilichum plunges that Renate hosts. If one logs into the social media, many days people pop in and ask for a buddy to meet them somewhere. On any given day, there's someone plunging in Puget Sound, and often with others. If you choose to get into deliberate cold exposure, please do it safely, following your intuition and personal research, not just from my provocative storytelling. This podcast episode is for education and information purposes. Cold plunging can support a healthy quantum lifestyle, but I am an ecologist and not a physician. I would encourage you to seek advice from a legit medical practitioner before embarking on your cold exposure practice. Hopefully someone that spends more than 15 minutes with you at a time. Otherwise, I'm glad to bring you another episode about cold. It starts right here. Enjoy the conversation.
So my name is Renate Rain, and I'm 53 years old. I have two adult daughters and 6-year-old granddaughters that are triplets. They live in Texas, so I miss them very much. But thanks to technology, we get to see them a lot more than we would if they did what I did and moved away when I had a baby to my parents. So I'm very grateful for that. I have been working on my health most recently about, 8 years. Before that, I was extremely unhealthy and just working on, my main priority would just be to lose weight. I gained and lost 100 pounds 3 times and now care much less about the weight as I do about actually being healthy, which is actually what brought me to cold plunging. With everything that was going on in the world, I was trying to get metabolically healthy and was interested in mitochondrial function, circadian health, and quantum biology, those kind of things. And I found a doctor on Instagram who I spoke with, and she suggested I cold plunge. So that's how I got started.
That's a great origin story. That's so great. I mean, congratulations on, finding some health. Quantum biology, quantum health is maybe a little obscure. I know a little bit about it. I know there's a couple doctors I sort of follow tangentially or superficially. Yeah, and we've talked about, I think, on the podcast a little bit, although I haven't named it as such. Generally, I refer to it as like biohacking or something. That's more like maybe recognizable or something, but I don't even know if people know what that is. So yeah, I don't know if we've talked about mitochondria even. Like I think it's this amazing, I don't even know what to call it.
My batteries.
Batteries in our
cells.
That sort of thrive on sunshine.
And never happier now that I'm even in Washington.
That's right. Even with a little less sunshine.
Right.
For how long then have you done plunging then?
So I started my first plunge. I actually hooked up with a person on Instagram that I didn't know. And I know that we had both tried to do it in our home bathtubs, which was a miserable failure because one, the amount of ice you have in your freezer is minimal and is not enough. And also the motivation to get into a cold bath at home is hard. So we agreed to meet down at Sunnyside Beach, and something about meeting someone, having an accountability partner. So we showed up, we set our timer for 1 minute. It was September 26th. We went out into the water for 1 minute and we charged out after 1 minute, hooting and hollering, thinking that we accomplished something incredible. We felt pretty great. And we thought that we would add 30 seconds a week to get up to 30 minutes by New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. That was the goal. And that day, though, walking out of the sound and getting home, it dawned on me that my back pain was gone. So that's what started me.
That's so great. Yeah. So only 6 months ago or 6 months ago. That's amazing. Yeah.
I came home and told my daughter, she's 35, and I told her, and she said, "You could stay longer than 1 minute." And I said, "I can?" I didn't know I could. I thought I had to acclimate, which you do need to acclimate, but I didn't realize because we set that timer. So she went with me the next time, and I think we stayed 3 or 5 minutes, and then we just went up quickly from there.
Yeah, I think there is something to be said for like adapting, and maybe it's mostly mental. I'm not sure if there's anything to our physicalness of it.
I did work up to 30 minutes, but that's still kind of long for me.
Right.
Now my sweet spot is around 10 or 12 minutes.
I don't know if you're interested in how I started, but yeah, I'd heard about it a few years ago. I went through like a bout of like anxiety and depression. I think the big move here, and then I was injured and I wasn't running, and like over caffeinating in the day, working too hard, and then maybe a little alcohol at night to like help me sleep. And yeah, it wasn't helping at all. And so it just,
sleep, but not
I was essentially like in some maybe adrenal fatigue. if people know what
Right.
that is. But essentially, like I was just like cortisol was just pumping at the wrong times of the day. So yeah, I didn't really start though with the cold. I like knew about it and I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'll try that someday. But I never really wrapped into my protocol, I guess.
Sounds horrible. That's why.
And I think if you don't feel like you have something kind of wrong, like so I'll say in air quotes, like wrong with you or something that's like, I don't know if you'd pursue it willingly if you're just like, in the apple of health.
Right. I'm the person that doesn't like to be cold. I take vacations only if they're tropical. I don't go play in the snow with my children. I don't make a snowman. I'm that person. So
Hmm.
when I realized or discovered, because I go paddleboarding right there at Sunnyside, but I've never gotten the water before. It's too cold. That's always been my story. And I wanted to move. I was actually looking into moving to Arizona last year. I wanted to move to the sunshine. The more I learned about the sun, the more I was determined that I should be living in the sun. But for my whole adult life, I've suffered from a lot of depression, probably partially hereditary. My mother's bipolar and my father's, raging, many things raging. And my mother, but I also had situational good reasons to be depressed. Add that to the seasonal, stuff in Washington. And I spent every single winter for the last 30 years, part of the time in bed. Just I'd go to bed. We called them my down days, and my family expected them. Maybe they would be 4 days, or maybe they'd be 2 days, but I almost practically scheduled them into my life from October to February. And that didn't happen this year. Yeah, it didn't happen at all.
You say no naps.
No naps. No hibernating this year. Yeah, I did not hibernate this year at all.
Oh God, that's like something in our house we say because at some point when our son, he's 11 now, but when he gave up naps, we were just
Right.
like, that's what he used to say, like no naps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said for sleeping. I mean, I'm a fan of naps. Sometimes I'd resist them too. My wife's a big napper, so yeah, I don't want to, and I feel like I learned to appreciate them and I don't give her a hard time about it. But yeah,
Right.
I think, yeah, depression's tough. And I think certain people can deal with it in certain ways, like with
Right.
gut microbiome or maybe sunshine and maybe cold. Yeah,
Right.
but it is a rough thing to go through. And yeah, I know.
I take a nap
Not,
because I need a nap, right?
mhm.
Now, it's not because, hibernating and going under the blanket for days.
Yeah. So it's interesting. You're looking into moving to Arizona. And then I think did you might take a trip recently and it was like hard to find cold water?
Yes, because their cold isn't that cold. Their tap water
Uh-huh.
isn't that cold. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I was in Las Vegas. We went to the pool, but the pool, even though it wasn't heated, yeah, it still wasn't kind of cold enough. It was actually like very pleasant, but yeah, I had to stick back to cold showers, which I find it kind of excruciating. They're kind of rough, but I can do them. But like you said, getting into your bathtub is just it's a hard practice to do.
yeah, I
For
find that showers as last resort. I know that a lot of people recommend you start with the cold showers. I just don't. I mean, we have the sound. We go in slowly. You can for 2 minutes. It's easier together, with the group. And so, if it's a last resort, I did also went to see my granddaughters in Dallas in December, and I went to a local lake. I think it was 55, and it
hmm
was sort of easy, but it was better than the shower for sure. I did get in Sedona. I did get them to let me in the pool, but when I first asked, the housekeeper said no. She said it's closed, and I said I know, but I just need you to let me in. So they're just not used to people wanting to get into the cold water.
Yeah, it's not normal. Yeah, and I feel like, the normalness, it was probably something 100, 200 years ago or more. It was just super normal to get into cold water, right? Before
Oh, for
like
sure.
water heaters and plumbing. I think about that all the time, like how normal it has been for the human existence for us to get into cold water. So I feel like it is this, I don't know if you agree, there's some sort of like ancient technology we're tapping into.
Right, we're going backwards.
Backwards in some way. It's like sort of medicinal. I think it's like modern but traditional sort of
Right,
medicine.
right. We're finding out what's always worked.
And so you prefer Puget Sound. And we just released this podcast with an interview with Dr. Kraus, who's a local naturopath and acupuncturist. And we talked about different sort of ways we can expose ourselves to cold,
Right.
essentially. And yeah, for some people, it's like a cold shower is great, or for some people, rolling around the snow is the way to
Hmm.
go.
Hmm.
But you prefer Puget Sound. So, can you explain like what Puget Sound is?
I had a friend visit from Dallas and she said, "What's a sound?" And I was like, "It's coming in from the ocean. It's a
Uh,
because we're the Salish Sea. It's not like the ocean in that you don't have the big crashing waves that you see, but you're in land. I don't know. You're going to
yeah.
have me looking. You didn't put that on my
I
question list,
know. Sorry, that
right?
wasn't a question I prepped you with, but yeah, it is like it's an estuary essentially,
Yes,
right? Like a gigantic estuary,
right.
not like a little baby estuary. The southern end of the Salish Sea, it was carved out by glaciers thousands of years ago,
Thousands of years
and they
ago.
left out these like deep troughs that are filled with ocean water. So it's
Right.
salty. Again, waves can get big during like wind and storms, tidally influenced. Potentially, we share the space with orcas and porpoises.
Let's see. We've seen harbor seals quite
Mhm.
often popping their heads up. And once one of the California sea lions. The jellyfish have been there on the beach when I started. Now, they're the reason I don't swim around more because that's my kind of fear. But those porpoises are pretty amazing. And we have heard that the orcas have been only a few miles away a few times, but I'm waiting. I'm just waiting for them to show up. I
Yeah.
loved what you guys talked about, how, that was good for them as well as us, to be in the water. One of the plungers had sent me some appreciation for outdoors, saying that she feels as if she's, part of the sunset instead of an observer when she's in the water. I thought that was beautiful. And that she, answers the call to go in the water instead of watching it because it's staying outside because it's too cold. She's noticing more in the change of the tides and the sunrise, the weather, the waves. All of that is more, she's more aware of all of that because she's now going
Mhm.
into the water.
That's
So,
cool. You
right?
don't need a tide chart. Oftentimes, we refer to a lot of times when to know when you get it online now. You're like,
Right, right.
yeah, when is the best time, to go tide pooling or to go find
Exactly.
clams or sort of things. But it's so awesome that you kind of have this internal map. You're mapping it in your brain.
Getting
You're
in
more
tune.
familiar and
Yeah.
more intimate with it for sure. Somebody mentioned this a couple episodes ago. We're talking about trees, obviously, but talking about like the animals and more than human relations. They're just kind of like, where do you guys go? Where
Right.
are you guys?
Exactly.
Like, why
Exactly.
aren't you in the water anymore? They probably know us. They know the like what boats are, I guess.
Hmm.
But yeah, they're not super familiar with us flopping around in the water
Right.
like we used
Right.
to.
Exactly. Exactly.
Because I have the plunge tank in the backyard, which is super simple. I didn't explain it too well, I don't think, on this last episode, but it's basically this like metal trough. And I
Okay.
just fill it with water. Ice super is pretty pricey and really just drops the temperature not much. So in my mind, like today, the weather is like super interesting, wonky. It was like snowing earlier, now it's
Right.
like sunny, but it's in the 40s. So really, it's just at whatever the air temperature is. But Puget Sound, I think, is fairly steady, although it's warming because of climate change. I think our oceans and Puget Sound too has been absorbing so much carbon dioxide, and that's why we see kind of issues with some of our marine life. But I think it's warming up a little bit, but it's pretty constant temperature wise. Do you know what it is normally?
So it's right now about between 46 and 47. And I think when I first started 6 months ago, it was a little over like 51.
Oh,
So
really?
it
Okay.
stays, the range isn't too much. Now, if it's moving, it's cold, it feels colder. Just like Dr. Huberman said, if
Mhm.
you're moving, so the water feels colder if it's moving. So on rough days, it definitely feels colder. It won't register colder, but it is colder.
That's
And I do
right.
prefer, I have a tank also, and mine's outside as well. So I'm still plunging outside like you. But then there's nature, especially there's birds like crazy right now, right? But it's definitely, you don't have the accountability of other people because you can choose to not get in if you don't want to. I haven't actually gotten all the way out there and then chosen not to get in, but it would be possible. And then it's also a longer 10 minutes alone than it is in the sound. We're looking at making a ice out of a freezer in the garage. I guess maybe dreading it because it's indoors. I did do
Yeah.
my first actual real ice bath in a forge in Arizona at Morosco Forge. 32 degrees with Adrienne Jezik, one of the owners, who is a guide, and she makes it into a whole experience, a deliberate cold exposure guide. She has developed a method called the Morozko method, and it's very ceremonial. And I'm actually just got approved to take or accepted into her program. I'm going to take it. I just don't know how I'm going to use it here because our conditions are different, because that's very one-on-one. She does a sound bath and has smells, and the whole experience is very immersive experience, but it's in a small room, which is not what we have here.
So accepted, does that mean to be a participant or to be sort of trained as a guide?
I'll be trained.
Okay.
Which I've guided a lot of people into water already.
You have. Yeah. So, I mean, there is some ceremony to it. And you talked about the difference between being indoors versus being outside, being alone versus with other people. I think that's a big important part of it. What does it look like? What does it feel like when you're helping other people get into water?
So when I started, I would just invite people because I said, my pain is gone. I'm in a good mood. You should come. That was basically all I was doing. And after 1 month, I started the Instagram page because I thought my people weren't coming. And still, most of my people don't come. Frankly, you have to be the right person. And what I've found is most people that come because their people won't come. But at first, I was just like, if you come, I'll go in with you. Same as kind of an accountability thing. I didn't really know much. I did find that woman that I just mentioned, and she does meditations. And I learned from her meditations what seemed to work best, which is a very calm approach, mindful approach to go in the water. And in the beginning, it was a one person or two people at a time. So I started the plunger page on Halloween. And as we grew, I realized, I should probably be more helpful. If I'm going to invite people, I also should then do something when they show up other than go, come on, So I would listen to her meditations before I came down every single time. And I felt like I was choking. I was so nervous that I would forget something, or I felt a lot of pressure that people were trusting me. On the one hand, I'm not taking responsibility for anyone. This is a public beach and this is an opportunity for you to try something. I don't want anyone to try alone, because most people have heard about it from somewhere besides me and not known where to go or how to get in the water. It's like, I've heard that's good for you, or the water calls me also, but no one will go with me. So my main message was, I will go with you, and I will go with you into the water. And that's all I wanted everyone to know. And I've actually been able to do that with people in Germany and many other states virtually, just because I honestly want anyone that wants to have an opportunity. So I had to learn a little spiel that was short, covered all the bases and short, before everyone gets in the water. And then it just grew up to 50 people at a time. More than 250 people have come with me, and then more people because they've gone to other locations that have gotten started, and I've been able to help people start other locations. So the fact that I say, let's go, and people come is kind of surprising to me. But apparently, that's all they need is someone saying, we'll be here. Yeah, some people I'm holding their hands. Some people I have to get really, really close and look them in their eyes. Some people need more support. As we've gotten bigger, I am not able to do the one-on-one at a big event or a big morning. But if anyone's super scared, they just message me privately, and I meet them at the beach. I meet a lot of people one-on-one that nobody's there for that, just because I don't want anyone to feel self-conscious. And that's one of the benefits that I personally have received, besides the pain relief and the mood, is a confidence that I did not have before. Because even when I first started, I would just be like, I have to talk to these people, and it makes me feel nauseous. Even though I wanted to do it, I don't have that anymore. I'm able to now at least talk about this because it's so important to me that people have the opportunity if they want it.
That's so incredible. I didn't realize all this one-on-one time you're doing with folks and everything, because honestly, I popped in, I can't remember, over break, because I did find you on Instagram. I'd been lurking around the corners of Instagram and sort of followed a certain hashtag. It had been starting to feed me like people, mostly like white people in like Northern Europe,
Yes.
like jumping in ice or like snow-banked rivers or something like that. Yeah, or like knocking into like a square in the ice in the lake or whatever. And then all of a sudden you popped up, and I was like, Puget Sound. I was like, what the Yeah, and like, wow, you're just like down the road from me. So really, like, I felt so grateful.
One of the first people, I even have a book I keep of it. One of the first people that came that I didn't know was coming, but new people come without me knowing. In the beginning, I always had conversations before they came, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
where we're going to meet, all those things. Well, now that I've streamlined it, it says where we're going to meet. It says where we're going to
Mm-hmm.
meet. Please come 15 minutes early. I don't have all
Yeah.
those conversations anymore. But you were
Yeah.
one of the first people, and I remember just being like, oh, now I really actually have to be here when I said I'm going to be here.
Hopefully that inspired some confidence. I wasn't like totally a first timer. I remember you asked me, you're like, have you ever done this before? And I was like, yeah. Yeah, I've done it. I got a tank in my backyard. I would take cold showers. I can't remember if it was like Thanksgiving or winter break because I'm sort of injured. I'm not up early running anymore. Sometimes I'll just sleep in. Yeah, I'm not getting after it super early anymore. Even though I get up early for work, it's not out of the ordinary for me to get up before sunrise or whatever. But yeah, for a while it was yeah, it was still dark too. It was like kind of
Mm-hmm.
dark. Yeah, and that's cool that you lower the boundaries for access for other people. Like doing it virtually. I don't know if you like have your mobile device and then you're getting in the water with them. Do you do that sort of thing? But that's lowering those barriers to entry, I
Right.
guess. And that's really awesome.
So on my Instagram, I say on my personal one, it's not private. My personal one, I say, if you want in the water and you don't have anyone to go with you, I will go with you. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter where you are. And so people have taken me up on it. A lot of pools in like
Mm-hmm.
Arizona and where else? Arizona, mostly the pools, Nevada. They're starting to warm up though.
Yeah, yeah. And so mostly it seems like people, and I know we have some other stories you might want to share, but it seems like a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people like the water calls to them. Some people perhaps they've heard about fat loss and they feel like they need to lose some weight. Some people are in it for the energy parts of
Mm-hmm.
it. It's like one of these things. If you kind of scan the corners of the internet about it, it's almost cures everything. I want to say it's true, and there's not a lot of scientific studies,
Right.
associated with it. Actually, I didn't know we released that last podcast, and right before Dr. Huberman had released this like 2 hour podcast about like all the science
Mm-hmm.
related to it, and it was so beautiful. I'm so envious actually. I like wish I know that much that I can embed that within my podcast episode, but that's why the show notes are for. You can direct people to
Sure.
Dr.
Sure.
Huberman's 2 hour episode about things. So, but there are a lot of benefits that aren't affirmed by science because
Right.
there aren't those studies out there. But a
Exactly.
lot of anecdotal evidence as well as people's lived experiences.
But every system of your body supposedly benefits from your cardiovascular system to your circulation system to your nervous system. So like you said, they're not studying it as much as maybe they are now as we get to know more, but I have pages of benefits that I've read from people. But then I also, like you said, I can tell you some of the benefits that our members have received. So in the beginning, I always heard about the benefits about pain relief and mood hugely. Several members have fibromyalgia, and they can feel a difference just walking out is different than walking in. I can see it myself. Those stairs are steep at Sunnyside. That last step, going down, they're walking like 1 foot each step, and then the way out, they're just walking out normally. You can just watch that and see that and just go, wow. But lately, I've been hearing a lot more. This doesn't have to do with cold plunging, I guess, about the community. As much about the community as I've been hearing about the benefits. The benefit being a community, and that makes me happy. But because I didn't know what I was doing, I still don't probably to create the community. And the only thing I could think of is that there's so many people are coming alone because their spouse or their best friend won't come. So they all show up vulnerable. They all show up afraid because everyone's, even if they say they're not afraid, they're apprehensive or anxious. There's some level of something before they walk out into the cold water with a bunch of strangers after undressing on a cold morning. So there's so much to that. One woman said to me this today, it's really got me. She said, vulnerability is normalized in this space. So I just loved that. She said, being immersed in the sound allows you to focus on the sensations and being present in the present moment, noticing the color of the sky and the rhythm of the waves, the gritty sand, etc. The feeling of community, sharing the morning with others, passing smiles and words of encouragement. Everyone is welcome as they are. An inner strength, knowing I can breathe through difficulties, affirming I can do hard things, and witnessing my mind and body are capable every time I return to the water. And then also, she said, the joy. She said she was drawn in by a picture of the smiling group of people in beanies. And it has been a long time since she felt that free and joyful in the water. And plunging has brought that joyful spark back to her life. So her benefits were more kind of all emotional and mental than so many of the physical ones. Because as I said, so many people have the pain relief. I hear a lot of people telling me they're better mothers because they're more patient. They're calmer. I have someone say their allergies are a lot less this year than they normally have. And that may just be being outside. Maybe. I had someone tell me she was on a low dose antidepressant that she came off with no side effects in 3 weeks. Her mood's improved. She's happier, smiling for no reason. And she had a lower back pain that she no longer even hardly notices anymore. And she thought she'd never have a day where she didn't have to take medication for that. Overcoming body image issues, because people of all ages and sizes, show up and just get in the water. It's not like getting undressed in Hawaii. It's a much different feel.
All right. And I'll acknowledge I have body image issues, and there's a lot of uncertainty and risk and emotional exposure. I gained down to shorts, and it's like shorts and maybe some bikinis and some like modest Pacific Northwest outdoor swimming attire. Essentially, that's the vibe I feel like. So,
and don't you feel totally accepted in there?
Yeah, it doesn't feel too bad. Yeah, and the beanies, I try to sport. I think most people know I don't have a lot of hair, so I try to have a big beanie collection. Yeah, I think the times I've been like, I'm going to switch up my beanie today. I'm going to, take this one out of the box. Some of those anecdotes or testimonials too, there's some things that I noticed that I always don't pop to my mind, things that I have felt changes with. But yeah, again, like I'm seeing the chiropractor like way less, taking way less like ibuprofen for things like that. You would lean on. The antidepressant thing is amazing.
Yeah.
Like seriously. Yeah. And I've resisted, and I was like this close, maybe not this close, but like this close from like being on some serotonin inhibitor. And I talked it over, and I was like, I'm going to try some other things. I'm going to try sunsets and sleep and lifting heavy things and cold water essentially.
Right,
so yeah,
right.
But yeah, coming off it with little side effects, is amazing.
Yeah. And we have someone that's going through a divorce after a very, very long time. And they said that they just find joy coming. They said twice a week, I feel good. I can't find a way it's not good for me. I get out of the house, I'm around smiling people. Is it the people? Is what they said. Is it the people? Is it a mental or physical addiction? I don't know, but coping with this divorce much better than I expected. And they just keep showing up.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know if it's a solution for grief either, but I think you asked me earlier because you acknowledged that my mom had died.
Yes.
And then you're like, are you in your tank this week?
Yes.
I don't know if you asked me on purpose, but I was like, yeah. A lot of people don't know I have this habit, I guess. I feel like the tank has helped not to like run away from my grief, but definitely acknowledge that. I was like, oh, yeah. When I first got in for the first time after she died, I was like, yeah, am I using this as like I think I said with Dr. Krauss, like as a tool just to like kind of cover up the sadness? And I
think it's alcohol that's covering up, but not cold.
Yeah.
So, Wim Hof says that the cold is what saved him because his wife committed suicide and he had 4 babies at home to take care of. He said, I had to live for them. And that's what saved me was the cold water. So a lot of people have found help with grief with the cold water. And I think he just forces you. It's like such a reset in your brain. I read somewhere that it is like almost akin to, there's similarities in how powerful it is to shock therapy. You can actually have some changes in your brain with that. So I'd have to go find that research and see if it's actual research or someone just saying that. But I do believe I've had 2 people that have very serious mental illnesses that I know of in the water with me that stood there and said, I feel fine. One said, I feel fine. And one said, I feel like myself, which was huge for them because they're both suffer from mental illness that I know them personally. So that being in the cold, you're forced to be in the moment, right? You can't go very far from the moment when you're in the cold water. So if you're grieving or just in a bad place, it really brings you to right now. And then when you get out, you can kind of like start again.
Yeah. That's
Does that make
great. I
sense?
can feel like I feel like myself. Wow. The ecologist in me, I was like, want to acknowledge like the epinephrine, the norepinephrine, and the
Dopamine.
dopamine, like that just has lasting effects beyond, yeah, just
Oh yeah, for
the
hours.
time in the water, but for the whole day. So it is
Hmm.
amazing. But then,
Hmm.
yeah, I think, but the community, there is like those other values beyond just like the biochemistry part that's maybe just don't need to explain. It's just like we
Right.
just
Just
accept it, right?
trust.
Yeah, it's fine.
You just have to try it too. I don't push anyone to try it, but I invite anyone that wants to try it because no one's going to come there if they're not there. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
People always want to tell me, how do I get my spouse or my friend? I'm like, you
Yeah,
can't. You just
yeah,
can't. You know.
yeah, and the intention part of it was important as well. And Huberman talked about this and just like it's different. And you said something earlier about like people jumping into cold when they weren't really expecting how cold it was going to be and how shocking that can be. Or like,
Right.
I think everyone has that fear of like falling in, like off the
Right.
boat, off the pier, or being shoved, sort of
Right.
horseplay, getting shoved. And that's like the shocking, the most unwelcome thing. I think that's what a lot of people think about when they're getting into cold is like, yeah, it's like unwelcome, it's accidental, it's not something intentional. And that's what jacks up your cortisol and what is like, probably stressful, like the bad stress.
Yes.
But doing it intentionally is something that doesn't actually jack up your cortisol, which is like the good eustress. That's incredible to me. So that's what I found super fascinating. So we call it plunging, I think too. For a long time, I just referred to it as cold exposure. I learned about winter swimming the last couple months in the Pacific Northwest at Stilcombe. We're building this cultural tradition. It seems like you're also connected to this wider network of winter swimmers / cold plungers that's sort of coming alive now that we're active on social media. So do you see other cultural traditions that you think you're drawing from or ways that you're adopting, you're learning from other people, whether you know them or not personally? And then I guess what are you incorporating into your practice?
I'm probably more inspired than able to incorporate because I'm inspired by so much in Finland and Norway getting into the ice, or they're going to these locations. We just don't have access to that. Now, when we go camping or hiking, Don might be like, "You're going to what? You're going to plunge there?" Because I'll find somewhere and try to get into it since I've been starting. So I'm much more adventurous now than ever because I want in the water. But we
Mm,
just don't have what they have. So I watch all of the world, really, anyone that I can find around the world that's cold plunging or dipping. Some places call it dipping, or even doing the Nordic cycling, which is cycle from hot to cold, as long as you end on cold. I did get a sauna here at home, and it's hard to do because you don't get hot after you cold plunge. You can go in the sauna and sit for an hour. You just don't get hot. So I've been trying to figure out how to do that. Like I can go 20 minutes in the sauna, then get in the cold. I'll tell you that cold is a lot colder when
mm,
you're coming out of a sauna.
yeah.
So it just might not be something that actually works for me. There's a mobile sauna. It's a mobile hot tub place that rents out. And she got a hold of me and asked if I wanted to collaborate. I'll make sure to let you know.
Yeah, let me know. Because before COVID, so I was doing a lot of sauna at the YMCA, Pearl Street,
Mm-hmm.
and the lockdown came down. I mean, they closed, and so that was really the last time I did a lot of sauna. But that was my thing actually before cold. Thinking about that, I hadn't really talked about that too much. Getting in the sauna and then taking like just the coldest shower in between, like cycling, in and out. That was mostly what I was using the Y for. I wasn't even going to work out as much. Like half the time I was there just to use the sauna, and I haven't been back because it seems like being in a hot box with airborne
Dangerous.
illness floating around isn't the best place to be. But that's,
You get
yeah,
your own.
on offer up. I scan and sort of window shop, but I haven't pulled the trigger yet. But I think
Set the little alert.
my wife's down. I think we got space in the backyard. It'll probably happen. I'm not sure
Well,
when
she
though.
said she would bring it to the parking lot and then we just have to cycle people out. It's a fire based one, it's portable. So
Yeah, okay.
And she's, doing it for advertising for her. It's new that she just added it to her business. Yeah.
I'm down. Yeah, I thought about too, because I've talked about it with my dad, and he's interesting. Actually, the last time I talked to my mom, we talked about it, and again, I
Oh,
talked I talked to her about it for months actually, and she was like, "Yeah, not for me. You do you. That's cool." My dad is still asks me random questions about like, "What sort of wetsuit? Are you wearing your wetsuit in there?" I was like, "No, that's not the point." And he's like, "Are you guys, what do you call it, boiling clams?" Like he's all about like, do you have a fire? Are you starting a campfire? Like at Alki Beach or whatever, where we sort of
right.
grew up in West Seattle. It's like beach fires are the thing. I mean, there's definitely some ambiance to like a beach fire. I was like, that's a great idea. I don't know if the group would want that, but
Yeah. Give people more time together that's not in the water.
yeah.
Because people have been asking for it.
Honestly, it gets pretty cold. I've seen other people shiver right away, like even in the water or just out of the water. I feel like especially the air temperature is like warmer than the water, so I don't actually get cold until I put my clothes on and I'm like in the car. It's super weird. It's like this sort of after drop,
After
quote
drop.
unquote after drop that people talk about, and that's when I start shivering. So like, but it gets cold pretty fast, and a lot of people just seem to kind of beat it to their vehicles.
Or even beforehand, like I'm trying to set up a paint and dip. Go and they paint a picture and then they just instead we'll go paint the beach and then we'll dip together. But I have to find an artist that's willing to come teach us and how we go about that. So the weather probably has to be decent.
Yeah. At some point, it will be warmer weather. Well, people won't get hypothermia.
I try to avoid it. It take probably 40, 50 minutes of someone to be in the water.
Yeah.
But they'd be pretty uncomfortable, So from my understanding, from the serious cold plunging, ice bath experts, the only person that truly should not cold plunge is someone with a pacemaker. Truly don't even try. But anyone with a heart condition should definitely talk to their doctor, and we wouldn't want them to come in with us for their first time. Like, oh no, I have a heart condition, but it's okay. No, that's probably not someone I would say. I'm not taking responsibility for anyone, but I might say, I don't think that's a good idea. I would feel better if you talk to your doctor, right? But most people aren't coming to me to get in the sound with a heart condition either. And in the big picture, it is good for your heart because of the circulation. And as far as breathing, that's the number one thing. And that's the thing that's the hardest. It is a physiological response that will happen to every single person, no matter how many times you plunged, that the cold water takes your breath away, which is why those polar plunges are so bad. Especially when they jump off of things, they're probably drunk or hungover on New Year's Day, and then they're going to have that. And if they gasp and they have that cold response, that's when accidents can happen. So we do not recommend that. We go in as a group all at once, mostly because I'm keeping time. I can only keep time for everyone once, right? So, and it kind of everyone to go together. Everyone is so supportive of each other because I think, like I said, they come alone the first time. So the friends they have are friends they've met there, or they all know what it likes to be alone there. So that's so cool to see everybody so supportive. But we try to breathe deeply and slowly, at least for that first minute. And that first minute, it's almost quiet out in the water because everyone is just breathing through. But no matter how many times you've been, it's still going to be hard. That you're still going to have your breath catch. But I do tell people that it's 3 to 5 times before it kind of gets easier. Mostly it's because you know what to expect, because you're still going to have the reaction to the cold, but you kind of know what to expect. You know that if I drop down, it's going to get easier. You're not just doing it because I said you should drop down, it's going to get easier, but you then have the knowledge. So that's the thing. You said about your hands out. Your hands are so far from your heart and the capillaries are all tiny and they get coldest fastest first, and they're miserable. They'll be the thing that actually pulls people out of the water sometimes or not.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's like a macho thing, but I was like, put my hands in the water. I can't, for some reason, I can't hold them in this like prayer position. Like a lot of people, if we look at, obviously can't see me right now because we're doing audio, but yeah, a lot of images, people look like they're praying. And again, the science is that if you want to cool down your body as rapidly as possible is to put cold on your palms of your hands, I guess on your cheeks,
the top of your face, so
top of your face, and then the bottom of your feet. So, and there's no way to keep your feet out of the water, so your feet are in the water. But gloves, beanies, head out, hands out seems like the way to, I guess, allow yourself to kind of stay in a little bit longer than you would normally.
And 2 minutes is all that's really needed. New people are staying 4 to 10 minutes now. And that's only because they want to. I tell them 2 minutes is all you need. Anything else is because you're having fun. Believe it or not, it's fun. You wind up having a good time. There's not an award for who stays the longest. You're not going to have better results if you stay longer. It's literally just because, well, you came from somewhere. Everyone has to drive there and you're here. Sometimes they get challenged. Sometimes it's a guide thing. How long can I stay? But I don't encourage how long anymore. That's something that's developed for me as I've seen more people. Yeah. If I see someone shivering, I'm going to ask them, hey, maybe you might want to get out.
All right.
You don't want to be miserable. I don't want anyone to leave having had a good experience, but then go home miserable.
Yeah, it does seem like people stay a bit too long. It's a little uncomfortable. Shivering is not fun for anybody, but it does seem like people that are in it for fat loss, there's sort of these protocols for if you want to lose weight, and shivering is the way to do that. Yes. But it's not a shortcut for fat loss. It's pretty brutal.
I only had one person ask me about actually say, I want to do this for weight loss. And when I told her how long it would take, she was like, I'm not that interested in weight loss.
I'd rather just diet. That thing talking about, the more still you are in the water, that your heat kind of creates this like little buffer around you. Yeah, again, the science I think is out on that, but I wanted to do another episode about water, about the fourth phase of water. I don't know if you've heard about that. We sort of think of the phases of water. It's like a liquid, or it's a vapor, or it's ice, right? But for years, we've known about this fourth phase of water that's more like a gel, I guess. And so Jerry Pollack, he's at the University of Washington. He's kind of credited, but there were some predecessors that had noticed this dynamic with water, that it's like a gel essentially. So it's so small, we don't even see it except under a microscope, that like hydrophobic surfaces will repel water, and it creates this very, very thin layer of this different sort of water around that surface, including our bodies. But that's why like water just has this kind of mystical quality sometimes, where it just doesn't act right sometimes. It's not always a liquid, it's not always ice, it's not always vapor. The ripple effect when boats go through, or on the tail end of an animal like diving through the water, that's the fourth phase of water. I'm not explaining it very well. So I think like as we stand very still, that exclusion zone, that other form of water, is kind of sort of building. There's a book, I've read almost all of it. I don't understand all of it. It's like physics, and all the biohacking sort of podcasters have interviewed him pretty much. And so it's one of those things. It's like science that hasn't been like really disseminated. It's that weirdness about water, but it's super cool.
It is cool. And it's interesting that we don't know more about water, considering water is everywhere. And such a big, water is life, right?
Honestly.
I'm reading Blue Mind right now. Have you read that, Blue Mind? It talks about how we're calmer and better on, or near the water. They're going to have a Blue Mind Day, National Blue Mind Day this year. They're getting it added to the national days. They even talk about if you even can imagine the beach or an experience, even photographs. That's why there's so many pictures of hospitals of the beach, because it can even get you into that Blue Mind state. So lots of good stuff about the water.
You opened by introducing yourself and talking about the significance of doing the plunging at sunrise and sunset. And a lot of times those things come to mind are at the beach, right? So there's like...
And if you're in the water, you're experiencing it more than just witnessing it, which is a very cool thing that you can't explain. So you'd have to actually get into the water to experience it.
Yeah, the tree hugger staple question is, what is your favorite tree, either a species or individual tree you grew up with, or just like a conceptual tree?
Yeah, I had to think about it because I like a few trees, but the madrona tree, and I don't know if this is true, but I remember hearing that they were within 50 miles of salt water. And I love how when they get older, they're red and orange is gray, the colors.
Yep.
And that they have the berries in the fall and the flowers in the spring. So they give to the birds and animals. But really, I just love that they were only here. And then I find out later that they are only on the Pacific coast. So I kind of love that. They're a local tree, and they like to be on the water. And I like to be on the water.
They are my favorite too. I don't know if
Are
you knew
they?
that. Of
I did
course.
not know that. Is it true that they have to be within 50 miles of saltwater?
Yeah, more or less, yes. But 50, I'm trying to think what 50, kind of conceptualize 50 miles. I'd say east, if you draw a straight line east from us, like Tacoma-ish, like
Mhm.
they sort of peter out. You won't find them like in Enumclaw, like on the
Okay.
plateau, but like on the little rise, like Mount Si or Cougar Mountain, there's like little patches out there on Squawk Mountain, but east of that, they kind of
Mm.
peter out. But the northern end of the Salish Sea is the northern end of the range, and they're all over the islands. And then moving south, definitely they hug the western edge of the
Right.
world. For sure.
When I was a little girl, I'd play with the bark, and I just loved it.
They're
Yeah.
the best. They're the best.
Yeah.
You're not the first one to say that's their favorite tray, but yeah, when all my favorite guests say Madrone.
Oh, well, look at that. That slipped me in there.
You're in the upper echelon.
Well, it is a beautiful tree.
Yeah, go. So awesome. Yeah, I'll get up. I'll set my alarm.
It's really important to get your eyes, naked eyes, to the sun, especially at this time in your life.
Yeah, I think it's important.
So there's no longer at sunrise and no longer at sunset. I mean, there's like 3 people that want to do it at sunrise. Sunset is it's too late. It's 8:00 right now. And that's just, that's going to be messing with people's sleep.
Yeah, it's close to my bedtime.
I know, mine too. I got this responsibility.
Responsibility for people's circadian rhythms.
But you got to go to bed. No blue light. Yeah. Don't get me started.
Thanks for joining me again for another episode of Tree Hugger Podcast. I'm Michael Yadrick. Please check the show description for more information about Renate Rain and the Puget Sound Plungers. It takes a community to keep the podcast going. We are a totally independent side project operation, and you could donate to help cover the small overhead costs for the show. I'm at myadrick on PayPal and Venmo, and then on Cash App, you can find me at Michael Yadrick Jr. Next on Tree Hugger Podcast, I bring you a discussion with Laura J. Martin. Harvard Press just published her book, Wild by Design, The Rise of Ecological Restoration. Laura explores some of our most existential questions of restoration, like how to intervene in nature for nature's own sake, what are the natural baselines that humans should aim to restore, and is it possible to design nature without destroying wildness? Laura makes a call for ecological restoration to be socially just after showing us how, over time, amateur and professional ecologists, interest groups, and government agencies coalesced around restoration as a mode of environmental management that seeks to respect the world-making and even the decision-making of other species. Here's a clip of that discussion.
And so writing the book entailed going to lots of different types of archives. I think the one that most often surprises people is that I looked at the archives of the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, which was responsible for developing and detonating hundreds of nuclear weapons. But the U.S. Atomic Energy Commission was actually the main funder of ecology from the close of World War II until the 1970s, until it was eclipsed by the creation of the National Science Foundation. Part of the reason that history is forgotten is because of classification. The federal government did not allow ecologists to publish this research from 45 to 50 or 55 or so. And then when they did allow them to publish, they were not allowed to reference the atomic project, right?
The archive of this episode lives online at treehuggerpod.com. If you're interested in some summer reading, one can find Wild by Design and other restoration-related books authored by our guests at the page treehuggerpod.com/joining forces. The podcast is on social media at treehuggerpod, so feel free to point people in our direction. That's really the best way to support. And then also, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on whichever podcast platform you enjoy listening to. It really helps people find the show. The music for the show you heard from MK2, Astron, and Noir et Blanc. Thanks for hanging out. See you in the water.